Welcome to the Voice of St. Anthony Parish from Allston, Massachusetts, right here on WROL, 950 AM, 100.3 FM, and you can also hear us at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com and your favorite podcast platforms, some of which are listed over there at CatholicAudiomedia.com. Well, we're continuing our interview with Sister Orianne, and she is the co-author with the Sister Allison, both from the Daughters of St. Paul, of a book called Forgiven, A Guide to Confession and the Examined Prayer. It's from Pauline Books and Media and available at paulinestore.com, as well as it's available at the Pauline Bookstore in Dedham, Massachusetts, and those Pauline bookstores that are in your area as well, because they are in a lot of areas. In the meantime, let's switch over to Sister Orianne for the second part of our interview on her book, Forgiven. You bring out in the early part of your book how this is, in fact, a sacrament. It is an encounter with Christ. It's a sacrament of healing. And as you said at the beginning of the interview, that's the first question people will say, get it all the time. Why do I have to confess to a priest? But at the bottom line, it is exactly that. It is an encounter with Christ. It is his grace. And obviously you had that experience when you were 19 and returned to confession.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful. I was the kind of person where it didn't matter. I'm not proud to admit this, but it wouldn't have mattered how much I had read about the apologetics of the biblical roots of confession and where in Scripture told you to confession and the early church. It didn't matter how much I read. I really needed Jesus to invite me there and to let me know I had to go. And I'm not proud of that because that is an indication that, there was a real sense of, but somehow I'm an exception or what I'm reading, what the Lord is presenting to me through my mind is not enough. Like I should not have had that attitude, but I did. And a lot of people do struggle with that as well. And I'm really grateful that the Lord broke through that for me because I needed it. Yeah.
One of the things I always like to bring out is, when you look at the history of the church, you have these great saints, but they all went to confession.
Yes. Yeah, I think John Chrysostom was one that we looked a lot at, pulling quotes from him about confession for the actual book Forgiven, and several of his quotes are included in the book. And when I was looking at how he experienced and explained the sacrament of confession, I was just blown away, and I was kind of like, wow, I wish I would have read this when I was a teenager. But I mean, I don't know if my heart would have been open to it at that time. But truly, like a stunning explanation of the beauty and the glory of what happens in confession because of who Christ is, what he has done, and how he applies it to us in real time, in the stuff of our lives.
The concept of confession right now is extremely, it's a hot topic here in the United States, I've come to learn, because I think, actually, you come from a different perspective because you aren't are what they call a cradle Catholic. And especially some of the older Catholics were brought up with a very strict understanding of confession. You have to go to confession, otherwise you're going to hell and you can't receive communion and all this. And that's all they learned. They didn't learn all the other stuff. They just learned it like a bunch of rules. And part of what I'm always teaching is, no, you're missing the point. Confession is this encounter with Christ. It is a sacrament. And I always bring out, because a lot of people don't necessarily know this, I always bring out, it is more powerful. Every exorcist I know has told me this. It's more powerful than 100 exorcisms. So it's extremely powerful, but I'm fascinated by how many times right now I'm dealing with people who don't understand what confession really is, except it's something you have to do in order to go to go to Eucharist if in fact you have a mortal sin. That's all their understanding is. And your book helps to give a better understanding.
Yeah, that was really our hope, is that, whenever we're talking about sin, it can be a difficult conversation because it's a difficult thing to have to face in ourselves and in others. It's easier to face in others than in ourselves.
Sure.
But
sure.
I think that we cannot approach any sacrament void of who Christ is, because it's his grace and his person that we're encountering there. And I think that, in a sense, what you're describing is the result of poor catechesis, and maybe that wasn't intentional. I don't say that as an accusation, but it is poor catechesis to teach somebody the rules without the Christ, because this is all about Christ. And the reason that, we have these things in place is because he gifted. These are gifts. They're not, some kind of strict straitjacket that we're stuck into. These are gifts that are aimed for our freedom and life in abundance, which is what he came to give us, as he says in the Gospels. So to be able to learn about the sacraments in the context of who Christ is so important. And that's part of the reason that when we wrote the book Forgiven, we didn't want it just to be about confession, but we wanted to really put it in the context of living out of who Christ is in his merciful heart in all the days of our lives, the days we are in the confessional and the days we are outside of the confessional, and being able to rely on him as our merciful God who has, won us back on the cross. So,
No, I gotta. Speaking of confession, I have a bit of a confession I have to make, and that is, you write. It's a book. It's a little booklet. It's a book.
It's quite small.
Yeah, but it's not a pamphlet. It's a real size book. How many pages it got? It's got 125 pages, but it's about the size of your hand.
Yes.
And the latter half is prayers and different parts. The beginning half really gives a lot about confession. You have a FAQ on confessions and practical tips and everything else. Now, as a general rule, and I'm obviously going to break the rule here, as a general rule, I don't like those one-page examinations of confession, of conscience. Mm-hmm. And you don't do the reason why I don't like them. So that's good. That's true. And the reason is because they give you almost like a specific set of sins. And I don't really like that because exactly that. Some of them are real. You really, some people say, well, this isn't inadequate for me. I'm looking for something more comprehensive. And you have more space with that in the book. So you don't have one sentence. You have something that's, you have a whole set. You do it in sections. Relationship with God, and the way you're writing this is fascinating because I'm looking at this and saying, "Well, that's an interesting way you put things. That's an interesting way here," and it's not as did you, I don't know. Hypothetically, did you steal something today? But it's something a lot more comprehensive and really makes you think. I really enjoyed that. And was that kind of what your idea was when you were putting it together?
Yeah, essentially. This book actually came about because a teenager who was in RCIC, the Rite of Christian Initiation for Children, because she wasn't a full-grown adult, but she wasn't a child either. She was 15. She reached out and was expressing that she was having a hard time finding resources for confession that were appropriate to her age. And what we found is, as we were looking, there are a lot of, very straightforward 10 Commandments-based examinations of consciences before you go into confession, but often they stop very surface level. Exactly. And as you're saying, did I steal a paperclip? Okay, then I broke this commandment. Did I? Yeah. But what we found was we are relational beings. That's what we are. And that comes from the fact we are made in the image and likeness of God, who is Trinity, right? We are incarnate. And the fact that, when Jesus came, he started applying these 10 commandments to things that shocked the Pharisees and shocked the disciples. Whoa, what do you mean that counts as this, one of the 10 commandments? The fact that, he said, when we're talking about adultery, are you lusting after someone in your heart? That's adultery. No one ever applied it in that way before. And what he's doing is kind of looking at what are the relational aspects here. And so we actually, decided to use that same model that he he has for us in the Gospels and take the 10 Commandments, but rather than writing out a list of the 10 Commandments and all the ways to break them, like being able to say, how do these apply to my relationships, my relationship with God, with myself, with others, and with creation? And so we had points of reflection for those things to try to break us out of those confines we've already built for ourselves, and to really see, like, where am I missing the mark, which is the origin of the word sin, to miss the mark. Where am I missing the mark on who the Lord is calling me to be in relationship to who he is and to who he has made the gift of others and the gift of creation? And how can I really allow his mercy and his redemption and his transformation into that?
We're going to be back with Sister Orianne tomorrow. And again, she is the co-author of the book Forgiven, A Guide to Confession, the Examined Prayer, with Sister Allison. They are both daughters of St. Paul, and you can find this book at your favorite online bookstore. And of course, that would include online bookstores like Amazon and Barnes and Noble. But you know, one of the bookstores I don't mention, and I actually should, because they are a pretty large bookstore with all kinds of Christian books, Catholic and non-Catholic as well, and that is christianbooks.com. I forgot about that because they're based in Peabody, you know. So, and yes, indeed, you can actually find this book at christianbooks.com as well. You can also find it at paulinestore.com, as well as any Pauline bookstore and any Catholic bookstore as well. But Pauline bookstores, which Pauline Books and Media, are all over the place. You can find, I've been in other countries, and you can always find Pauline Books and Media. And they're also located in the Boston area at Route 1 in Dedham. We're going to be back more with Sister Orianne tomorrow. Have a blessed day. I want to call your attention to Catholic TV, which offers great faith-filled, family-friendly programming 24 hours a day. You can find your cable channel at www.getcatholictv.com, and you can watch online on the free apps or check out the YouTube channel. Daily Mass, Rosaries, the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and the Our Lady of Perpetual Help Novena are all available online and on demand. Check out catholictv.com. If you're searching for a meaningful spiritual experience, look no further than St. Anthony's Parish in Allston, Massachusetts. Join us at 43 Holton Street in between Soldiers Field Road and the Mass Pike. Immerse yourself in the complete St. Anthony's Parish encounter through our 10 o'clock a.m. chanted Mass. Whether you're a Catholic seeking a parish to call home or someone looking for spiritual guidance, our welcoming community is here for you. Visit our website at www.stanthonyalston.org for more information. St. Anthony's Parish, where faith finds a home.